Welcome to APLCrafts Lazy Die Studio. In today's video, we're going to finish off as much as we can of that die stock that you see there in the bottles. That was from Bonfire Nights. And then we're going to make a new colorway for Valentine's Day. We'll see how that goes. I'm just showing off some of those colors there. We have True Black, Pink Orchid, Fluorescent Fuchsia, Valentine Blush, and Lilac. And then, of course, we have your die materials that you should always have. Paper towel for your countertop, dedicated die pots, and measuring spoons, a spoon to move your yarn with, gloves, they could be disposable or reusable, mask, and you have your citric acid. And here I'm just showing the yarn that's been soaking for 30 minutes. I will put up an iCard so you can see the original video for Bonfire Nights, but here I am just adding a little bit more citric acid to the remaining bottles, just in case that citric acid that's originally in there may have, I don't want to say go bad, but have less strength or power behind it. So I'm just kind of giving it a refresh and a little bit of a shake to make sure that I get that worked in with the dye. I have 1.5 cups of water in the pot for the yarn that will be going in there. Be careful when you're shaking these squeeze bottles because some of these bottles, they like to leak. So when I'm dyeing back to back, I'll take the yarn that's getting ready to go into the pot and put it here. You can see that. And then I'll get the next set of yarn that needs to soak immediately into the soap water, because I know that this process with the yarn that I have right here is going to take me at least 30 minutes, if not an hour. So that gives this enough time to soak. So what I'm doing now is just repeating the process from the dye video about 4 videos back of doing Bonfire Nights. So we're starting off with the black with the lilac, getting that super saturated. I think that's enough. And I'm just going to press that in, make sure it gets in there real good. We will be flipping this, just like in that video. And if we need to touch up on the other side, then we will. Heat is on medium. And actually, I already see where I need to touch up, just on the sides. So, okay. Moving into espresso. Going to ride that transition line because we want these colors to blend in just a little bit. We don't want to make this too thick because we want to have a white gap over on this side, and this color will travel up the yarn, so don't want to make each stripe too thin, too thick, but you do want to get in there. That should be good enough. Let's push into that. And actually, I've got some dye that's wanting to come out this way, and I don't like that, so I'm just going to tilt the pan just a little bit to keep those colors on this side as I'm pushing this in. So maybe that dye will get in here. Okay. Going into cayenne. And I'm going to be a little bit lighter about riding that transition line. I still want to get pretty close. But I want to be very intentional about that transition line with this color. because I don't want to muddy up the colors too much. And with the wet yarn, this will spread. Feel free to go into the yarn and squirt the color in if you want. That's really funny. The lilac, when I press down, is clear. If I go into the espresso, you're still seeing color. So that is needing a little bit more manipulation. As we flip this, it should dissipate because the yarn will, so like it'll move the yarn around, and so some of the threads that didn't get anything will soak up some of that color. I'm still a little worried about spreading, so I want to tilt this pan a little bit more because I don't want these dark colors getting underneath and into this orange too much. Alright. Yeah, because look, the saffron is clear, almost. Interesting. Alright. I don't think that happened last time, which is why I think that's interesting. Shit, what color did I just do? I lost my order. Oh no. Let's see. This is cayenne. Okay, we did saffron. Alright, let's pour that saffron in here. Or cayenne. We're doing cayenne now. And remember, we're going to leave a gap of white. And just kind of gently ride that transition line. The heat is starting to do its job. I see a little bit of bubbling going on in the center here. And we are done with this side. I'm going to let the heat sit on this yarn for at least another 5 minutes. Try to get as much of that color soaked into the yarn as possible before we flip it. So I'll be back in 5 minutes to check this out. Okay, we're going to get ready to flip this over. Be very, very careful. I realized as I was doing this that I mixed my two color, like my, I didn't mix it, I flipped. So when I did this color here, it wasn't supposed to be saffron, it was supposed to be cayenne. And this color was supposed to be saffron and not cayenne. So, yeah, that kind of sucks. Yeah, I mean, you know, it happens. Alright, so be very careful when you flip your yarn, because this is going to be very hot. All of the color got soaked up with the heat, so that's good. Let me see if I can get this back to some kind of order here. Okay. All right. Okay. Keep the white up there. Just move this up. Black purple. Yeah. All right. Okay. I want to try to get it where the sections are as close as possible, even though we're moving the yarn around, because when we put our second layer on, I don't want to have too much blending going on where it's not supposed to be there. So, alright, that looks good. I'm leaving the heat on medium. I have not shut it off yet. So going back to the black deep purple, and we're going to touch this section up. Get in there real good. If I don't use up all this dye, that's okay. We can always do a no dye left behind type of situation, or use up all the dye stock situation. Don't want to take somebody else's name for their section when it comes to dyeing. You probably know who I'm talking about. I'm not trying to steal their stuff. So let's just touch this up. Alright. So we do have some dye left, so we will use that for using up the dye stock in the future. Espresso. Now, because we flipped this and the yarn is going to be in a little bit of a different order, you do want to be a little bit more careful when you're putting on your second layer of dye. Still want to try to ride that transition line if you can. And try not to blend too much. So if you see a section that's got some color in it, just try to hit the light parts and not the parts that have the different color in it. It's going to be a little difficult to do. Don't be mad at yourself if you end up covering up something. This is art, and it's a gradient. Ombre, gradient, whatever. So just enjoy the process. It's going to be alright. Okay. Alright, I got a little bit of that color left too, that's alright. Boom, done. Okay. Now let me push down on this a little bit. And if you look closely, you can see some of that color starting to ride up on that white. And that's why we leave that there, so that when we have that color riding up, it kind of looks like a natural flame going into the atmosphere, which is why we leave that alone, so that that will fall however it's going to fall. And that makes it the beauty of hand dyed yarn. It's always going to be a little bit different depending on how it wants to go up that yarn. But I'm going to push into this a little bit, make sure that color gets in there. The cayenne is already clear. The espresso bean is clear. The black is clear. It's just this saffron that is still working itself out. And I'm going to let that sit for 5 to 10 minutes. I will look at it at 5 minutes, and I will decide if I want to shut it off. So I'll let you know if I stop it at 5 minutes. But it's going to be anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes at this point. 5 minutes later. I look a little bit messy. I took the Bonfire Nights out of the pan, and it is sitting in the sink. So what I've done now is I'm getting ready to do my Valentine's Day colorway, which is going to be new. So I'm playing around with it. It's going to be a speckly color, a bunch of different pinks, and then a little bit of black in there. Not sure how the black's going to work out yet, but it's a new colorway, so we'll see how that goes. I have 1.5 cups of water in that pot, and I am actually getting ready to put some citric into the soap water because I really should have done that to begin with, and I didn't do that. Yeah, anyway, so I have 3 skeins of 8515 in that soak water right now. So I'm going to put a tablespoon of citric in there, let it sit for about 5 minutes so it can soak up some of that citric acid. I'm also going to put a teaspoon of citric into that pot so that when I move the yarn into the pot, I've got all the citric acid that I need because of the way that I'm going to be laying dye onto this yarn. It would not be a good idea for me to try to add citric afterwards, so I want to get all the citric in there beforehand. So that's what I'm doing right now. So my inspiration photo has a bunch of different squares of fuchsia and pinks and stuff like that, plus it's gridded out in black and the letters are in white. So I'm taking all of those elements and putting them onto the skein of yarn. So it's going to have the white background. Then we're going to start with speckling of true black. Then I'm going to go into lilac. I shouldn't say speckles because they're not going to be speckles. They're going to be more splotches than anything else. No speckling here. So let me rephrase that. There will be splotches of lilac, fuchsia, Valentine blush, and pink orchid. I will, however, be speckling the true black because I want just a little bit in there, not a whole lot, and I don't want to overwhelm all the pinks and the purple that's going to be in the skein of yarn, but I do want it to be present because it's part of that grid, and I like all of those colors together. So that's what I'll be doing. The yarn is still soaking in the citric acid, but it'll be ready in about 2 minutes, so I will start the heat in about a minute or so, and then I'll take that yarn out of the water, get it into the pot, and start doing my color layering. I really want to just let it sit and not touch it for several minutes while the pot is getting hot because I really want those speckles to set. If they move, if they get really splotchy, I think it's going to mess up the whole thing. So I really just want to leave it alone. I'm going to do a little bit of a test with my spoon once the yarn is getting hot, or once it's hot. We're not even close yet. Just to make sure it's set, because I really just don't want to touch it. I want to leave it alone as much as possible. And I still have my mask on because there's still some dye, probably particles floating around. I don't want to breathe that in. So. Okay. I decided midway that I'm just going to cut it to an eighth, not a quarter, because this is a lot of colors so far. Let me see if I can show you. This is a lot of colors so far, and I'm going to be layering more. So I'm going to cut that to an eighth for each color and not do a quarter of a teaspoon. I'm also going to let it sit for a minute or two in between putting more color on so that I can give this a chance to set, because it's just kind of free falling. So there's going to be areas where it's really heavy, areas where it's light, and I want to give it some time to actually get in there and like sit in the yarn before I add another color. But it's pretty cool because if you see right in there, you may have to pause and kind of blow it up a little bit. There's some breaking going on. This is why I like this lilac color, because it does break and it breaks blue. And you can see a little bit of that in there, which is really cool. It's not in the color palette, but I think it goes well. So for time, I'm going to speed up a lot of this process so that you don't have to sit here and just watch every single long second of it. I love this grungy, messy, beautiful. It's so beautiful. It's just, I don't know. It speaks to like my teenage goth years, you know. Yes, I actually was a teenage goth. Believe it or not. So we have a lot of dye going on. I am going to let that sit in the pot on the heat on medium for a good 10 minutes. I want to get it nice and hot throughout all of the yarn before we flip it and see what we're working with on the other side. I do not want any of this to bleed. I want it to sit exactly where it is, which means it really has to just sit in that heat for as long as we can. This patience is a virtue here. That's another reason why I cut it down to an eighth, because I got halfway through on that quarter teaspoon with the fluorescent fuchsia, and I was like, yeah, that's a lot of dye. We don't want to do that, because when you have a whole lot of dye, it's harder to heat set, and then you have a little bit of bleeding when you're working with your yarn. And you know, tiny bit of bleeding, okay, most of us accept that. When you have more than that, you know, a lot of us are side-eyeing that, right? So we want to make sure we avoid that. So we're working with a lot of dye. We want to make sure that that heat is really getting in there and setting that up. And that's another reason why we're doing that citric acid ahead of time, so that you're going to help absorb that through the yarn. So I'm going to come back in 10 minutes, and then I'm probably going to take the spoon and just kind of push it in certain areas to see if I'm getting any color. And if I am, I'm going to let it sit for another couple minutes. I'm going to start checking it every 2 minutes after that if I see color in the spoon. If I don't, then I'm going to go ahead and flip it. So I'll be back in 10 minutes. Give you a close-up. So this is what we're working with on the other side. I am not going to be speckling black on this side, but I think I am going to touch the rest of the colors, doing an eighth of a teaspoon again. The heat is still on medium. I'm going to put my mask back on. I think I'm going to work backwards. So I'm going to do an eighth of Pink Orchid. looks very different when you don't have the black in there. So we're going to let this cook for 10 minutes and then kind of do a spoon test on it, see how it looks before we flip it over, because again there's a lot of dye. So we will see what this looks like in 10 minutes. I really love the way this looks so far though. It's so grungy and messy and beautiful. It's really the best way I can describe it. Let's flip this. This is so dry. This is so beautiful. Okay, I just flipped it and I'm going to let it sit for another 5 minutes on the heat before I shut off the heat and then let it cool. It's a rainy day today, so I apologize for the lighting. But here is the final result of the yarn. And I gave it a name. It is called Bubblegum Baby Goth. So this is what it looks like skeined up, and I am going to go ahead and unskein them so you can see what they look like open. So here they are open. I think this came out so beautiful. Just the way the layering came out. You've got your speckles and splashes everywhere of the lilac and the black, and then that background of white. And then the fluorescent fuchsia is really shining here in that bright, bright pink. But then you have, it's toned down just slightly with the Valentine. But I think it plays out really well. Like this section right here has the pink orchid in there, and then this really bright section here is the fluorescent fuchsia with the mix of the black and the lilac. And the lilac breaks blue, so you're seeing some of that in there as well. Just a little bit of that. But I think it came out really, really great, and I'm excited for it. You can find these 3 skeins listed in the Etsy shop, and I also want to let you know that all of these sets in the shop are all marked down $10 off. So two skein sets are going to be about $35, so it comes out to less than $20 a skein. Three skein sets are $60. 4 skein sets are $80. And there's always reduced shipping, both domestic and international. So I will see you next month with a March colorway. We'll figure out what that's going to be. I'll see you soon. Thank you for watching. Bye.